The chapter began with the radiant light from the Cup of Reincarnation slowly spreading across the entirety of Korea. The light reached Jinho's office, the apartment where Jinwoo's mother and his sister Gina were staying, Chairman Woo Jinchul's office, and even the locations of Lu Jigang, Thomas Andre, Baek Yoonho, and Choi Jong-in. Finally, it reached Hunter Cha Hae-in. Before long, the mysterious glow enveloped the entire world. For one brief yet intense moment, the light became the only thing that existed. It surrounded everyone and everything, as if preparing the world itself for something entirely new. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light vanished without a trace. Yet despite disappearing so quickly, it had clearly changed something. The world, touched by that short but powerful glow, stood on the verge of transformation as time itself began to flow differently. The next scene shifted to the apartment where Jinwoo lived with his family. His mother's voice could be heard as she told Gina to wake her older brother. Gina hurriedly obeyed and quickly opened Jinwoo's bedroom door, calling out to him. To her surprise, Jinwoo was already awake. He simply looked at her and smiled warmly. In Jinwoo's mind, every little detail felt precious. The sight of Gina fresh from washing up, the smell of stew being cooked by his mother, the sound of chopping from the kitchen, and even the familiar scent filling his room. He treasured every single moment. As he stepped outside his room, his mother immediately noticed that he was awake, while Gina continued running energetically around the apartment. Then Jinwoo suddenly froze. A man was calmly sitting nearby, reading a newspaper. Jinwoo stared blankly before softly muttering, "Father." His father smiled teasingly and replied, "Father? Not Dad." At that moment, tears unexpectedly began falling from Jinwoo's eyes. His parents quickly asked what was wrong. Jinwoo simply answered that he thought he had just woken up from a nightmare. His family looked at him with confusion, unable to understand why he suddenly seemed emotional. Deep inside, however, Jinwoo knew the truth. His nightmare had finally ended. Now, his younger sister was safe beside him, his mother was healthy, and his father had never disappeared. He had been given one final chance to set everything right. This time, he refused to lose that opportunity. Now, he possessed the power to rewrite the future itself. The scene then shifted to Jinwoo's school. As he walked through the peaceful surroundings, Jinwoo wondered if it was all right for him to treasure this peace, even if only for a little while. He considered it a small reward for himself. After all, beyond the skies, the monarchs were already preparing enormous gates to invade once again. But just for a little longer. If the peaceful moments he was enjoying would not bring harm to anyone, then he wanted to stay and savor them for at least one more day. Later, the scene returned to the apartment. Jinwoo's mother was cleaning when she noticed a note left on the table. It read, "I'll come back after I'm done with what I need to do." The story then shifted to the dimensional rift. Beru could be seen holding the severed head of a monster, while Grand Marshal Bellion sat atop a mountain of slain demon corpses. To Jinwoo, this empty world filled with endless darkness felt unbearably lonely whenever there was no fighting. Standing before him was Yogimont, the monarch of transfiguration, whose body was slowly disappearing after being defeated by him. Jinwoo had finally defeated the monarch who stood at the center of everything. In his thoughts, Jinwoo reflected that it had already been 27 years since he first entered the dimensional rift. It seemed that his long and exhausting battle was finally nearing its conclusion. As Jinwoo sat on the edge of a massive rock surrounded by countless demon corpses, he realized that only one enemy remained, the Dragon King and his army of destruction. Fortunately, time flowed differently inside the dimensional rift compared to the outside world. Jinwoo estimated that only around 2 years had passed outside. Soon, he would finally reunite with everyone again. He wondered what his mother and father were doing now and how much Gina had changed over the years. He even wondered whether he should wait until she grew older before explaining everything to her. Bellion then approached Jinwoo and informed him that they had finished clearing the area and that no enemies remained alive. Jinwoo calmly replied that, all right, and they would not lose a second time. Then, while standing atop the rock with his 2 commanders beside him, Jinwoo uttered a single word, "Arise." At once, the countless demon corpses around them transformed into members of his shadow army. The scene then shifted to a crimson-red sky, filled with countless flying dragons. Seated upon a massive throne was Antares. He acknowledged that Yogyamat, the monarch of transfiguration, had been defeated. One of the dragons standing before him asked whether they should move to another location. However, Antares answered that he was tired of running away. This time, he intended to fight the Shadow Monarch here and now. He admitted that the Shadow Monarch was truly astonishing. Antares had never expected him to use the Cup of Reincarnation to turn back time itself. Then he smirked and declared that it was almost unbelievable to meet him alive and breathing once again. Soon, one of them would rest in peace for eternity. At that moment, shadows began rising from beneath the stone staircase leading toward Antares' throne. Antares slowly stood up and introduced himself before asking the second Shadow Monarch approaching him for his name. A powerful crimson aura erupted from Antares' body. Jinwoo stepped forward and introduced himself. "I am Sung Jinwoo." Dark armor enveloped his body as a blazing purple aura seeped through the shadows surrounding him. Then Jinwoo calmly asked Antares if he had any final words. Antares simply replied, "No." The dragons beside the Dragon King immediately prepared for battle as they fixed their eyes on Jinwoo. Without hesitation, Jinwoo dashed forward toward Antares. The Dragon King grinned as he charged directly toward Jinwoo as well. In the next instant, Jinwoo's dagger clashed against Antares' sword, creating an enormous shockwave upon impact. Behind them, the armies of shadows and dragons violently collided as the final battle finally began. The chapter opened in the real world, where 2 years had already passed since the Great Reset. Because of a prophecy made by a fortune teller, the entirety of America had been thrown into chaos. The prophecy stated, "The God who will bring doom shall soon descend upon this land." Normally, such prophecies would not attract much attention. However, the problem was that the one who made the prediction was none other than Norma Selner. She further declared that the god of death would descend upon the land alongside an infinite army of dead soldiers, and that no one in America would be able to escape death because there was no escaping the god of death itself. 2 years earlier, Ms. Norma Selner had accurately predicted the death of the North Korean dictator, a terrorist kidnapping incident involving airline passengers, and the collapse of the stock market caused by the real estate crisis. Because so many of her prophecies had come true, she had become the center of countless controversies and public attention. Now that she had suddenly proclaimed the end of the world, it was only natural for everyone to panic. The next day, a massive purple black hole appeared in the skies above Seoul, covering nearly the entire sky. Because of this, Ms. Selner's prophecy immediately became the headline of newspapers all over the world. People stared upward in fear as the gigantic hole slowly began to crack open. Some pointed toward the sky while others watched in complete silence. As the gate continued opening, terrified screams erupted from the crowd as they questioned what exactly they were witnessing. Then suddenly, everyone noticed that nothing was coming out of the gate. Amid the frightened crowd, a middle school student wearing a hoodie quietly walked past the people. A man holding a bouquet of flowers approached the hooded student and greeted him. "We're glad you've returned safely. Welcome back, Sung Jinwoo, or should I call you the Shadow Monarch?" The man admitted that he never expected him to return in the form of a middle schooler. Jinwoo casually replied that people probably would have been terrified if he had returned with a full beard after disappearing for so long. He also admitted that it did not feel bad to have at least one person welcoming him back. The man then commented that even the rulers themselves had not expected him to survive after trying to handle everything alone. However, he could now clearly see that Jinwoo's every step carried the weight of tens of thousands of soldiers. Behind Jinwoo's shadow stood his endless shadow army. Jinwoo smirked and remarked that the man surely did not come all the way there just to hand him flowers. He then asked what business an envoy of the rulers could possibly have with him. The envoy answered that the rulers had a message for him. He explained that the conversation might take a while and politely suggested moving somewhere else to talk. Jinwoo agreed, mentioning that there was actually a place he wanted to visit. The scene then shifted to an ice cream shop. To the envoy's surprise, the place Jinwoo wanted to visit was simply an ordinary ice cream store. Confused, the envoy asked why they had come there. Jinwoo answered that after spending so long in a place where nothing existed, it felt natural to crave something sweet. As he continued eating his ice cream, Jinwoo asked what message the rulers wanted to deliver. The envoy explained that the rulers wished to thank him as usual. Jinwoo immediately brushed aside the formalities and asked if there was actually a problem. The envoy answered that there was no problem at all. In fact, he had come precisely because all problems had already been resolved. However, the rulers had become concerned about his immense power, which could greatly influence the direction of the world. According to the envoy, the world without mana was far too weak to handle someone possessing his level of power. Then the envoy carefully proposed something. The rulers wondered whether he would consider moving to another world, one capable of accepting his power. The moment he heard those words, Jinwoo's expression turned serious. Instead of forcing him to move to another world, Jinwoo pointed out that they could simply seal his powers away completely if they wanted to. The envoy admitted that such a thing was indeed possible. As soon as those words were spoken, an overwhelming purple aura erupted from Jinwoo's body, startling the envoy. With a terrifying glare, Jinwoo coldly asked whether the rulers now intended to get rid of him simply because he was no longer useful to them. "Is it because you fear my power?" he asked. The envoy quickly denied it, clearly frightened by Jinwoo's reaction. He hurriedly pulled out his phone and showed Jinwoo an article featuring Ms. Norma Selner. The article once again described the prophecy of the god of death descending upon the world. Jinwoo asked what the article had to do with him. The envoy explained that before his return, Ms. Selner had caused a massive uproar with her prophecy. Back when he disappeared, she had not even been considered a particularly gifted fortune teller. However, after coming into contact with their world, her life had changed completely. Jinwoo then realized what the envoy was implying, and asked if that his very existence had caused this change. The envoy respectfully confirmed it. For a moment, Jinwoo fell silent before quietly asking if they could continue the discussion another time instead. The envoy stood up, bowed respectfully, and agreed before leaving the ice cream shop. Even after the envoy departed, Jinwoo's mind remained restless. He reflected that if every living organism possessed a fixed purpose for existing, then one thing was certain. As the Shadow Monarch who had stopped the world's strange phenomena and defeated the Monarchs with his strength, he had already fulfilled his purpose. But perhaps a great power that had completed its purpose eventually became troublesome, just like nuclear material that had outlived its usefulness. And if that was truly the case, would he eventually become an existence this world no longer needed? How meaningless, he thought. At that moment, Jinwoo suddenly sensed a familiar presence outside the shop. His thoughts immediately stopped. Startled by the feeling, Jinwoo quickly rushed outside the ice cream shop to look for the person who had just passed by. Meanwhile, the girl continued walking without noticing him. In her mind, she simply wondered why the smell of ice cream suddenly seemed so delicious. The chapter ended with Jinwoo's thoughts. The time will come when the question of whether it's okay for me to remain in this place will finally be answered. However, if there's a reason for me to stay in this world, it's probably because there are still people I love here. And the people who love me are still here as well. That alone is enough reason for me to stay. I'll remain here and find even more reasons why I should continue staying. That is the decision I've made.